Now let's bring in our panel. Doug Bandow is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute and a former special assistant to US President Ronald Reagan. And Negar Mortazavi is a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy, and she's also the host of the Iran podcast. And they both join me live from Washington, D.C. I want to start with Doug first. The whole point of the Memorandum of Understanding was so that Donald Trump could try and get an off-ramp, but he seems to have climbed back on that ramp. Is this a strategic mistake?
Well, there's no particular reason to think he's going to do any better this time than he did before. Unfortunately, the MOU was ambiguous. Both sides have accused the other of violating the agreement. We've already been through the rounds of attacks. We see Iran pulling in the Gulf countries. Trump is going to find the same pressures on him in terms of international oil markets. So I don't see this as leading to a solution. Both sides need to come back to negotiate, but the more they attack each other, the harder that becomes.
Negar, we've talked about this before. The Memorandum of Understanding was seen by many people as a win for Tehran. However, it doesn't seem to have been able to capitalize that. Now, the Israelis and the US are very insistent, saying that the Joint National Security Council is divided. That's the Iranian leadership, and that's why they can't. And there's a fight going on. What do you make of that?
Well, exactly, Imran, as you mentioned, Iran couldn't capitalize on that yet. And the understanding or the strategy right now is that Donald Trump wants to essentially stretch the limits of what he signed on paper, because what he signed on paper, it was very good for Iran and not so good for him. And after he signed it, I think he started to realize, because he started to get criticized by not just many Democrats, but also Republicans, that he's giving away so much to Tehran. And he's trying to stretch those limits and get more concessions on the battlefield. And Tehran's strategy seems to be to respond and escalate on the battlefield, to try to push the U.S. back to the limits of the MOU and then take the next step to that final peace deal. And I agree with Doug. I mean, what made President Trump think he's going to do better this time than the last time? This war is just not winnable. But I think he has forgotten, the pains that Iran was able to cause. Yes, U.S. has absolute military supremacy, but Iran has the advantage of geography, strategy, asymmetric warfare, and they essentially forced the U.S. to exit the war the way they did. And it just seems like President Trump is not happy with how he did it, so he's trying to go back to the battlefield, impose more pain and force to try to get more concessions.
Doug, it's an interesting point that Negar makes, because a lot of the Iranian calculation here is that perhaps it can absorb another round of violence from the Americans, but Donald Trump can't absorb the economic pressure. Now, we talked about that very briefly earlier, but the follow-up question I have there is, where is this going then? Because the Gulf states are under pressure. Donald Trump has suddenly said, actually, we're not going to do this toll. What we're going to do is investments. Those investments are already there. Is this a strategy that's floundering?
Yes, I mean, President Trump really doesn't have an effective strategy. He went into this war apparently on the assumption that a few days of bombing, decapitating the Iranian leadership, and then America would win. He actually talked about being able to help choose the next Iranian leadership. He imagined that the government of Iran would fall too quickly for them to close the Strait of Hormuz or to attack the Gulf countries. I mean, frankly, he went into this war in a dream world, imagining everything was going to go wonderfully. The war would be over in a couple of weeks. He'd be victorious. When that didn't happen, he had no strategy. So at that point, all he could do is use America's military supremacy. It's absolute. The problem is, you use the military for a political end. He wasn't able to achieve that. And he suddenly found that the Iranian leadership had prepared for this. He managed regime change. It appears he's gotten a more nationalistic, a more antagonistic leadership that's more willing to resist. And unfortunately, who can bear the pain more? He's found the Gulf countries don't want to be bombarded. The Europeans and Asians need oil. America ultimately will. So he's in the same situation today. He's going to find all of these countries coming to him saying, you've got to end this. And the Iranians are betting that they can put
Right.
up with a loss of revenue more easily and longer than he can put up with and the Western world can put up with an interruption of energy supplies. And I'm
Nagar,
afraid they are probably right.
Nagar, the reason I asked Doug that particular question is I want to talk to you about the day after. If there is a resumption of hostilities, there will be a day after. Now, the day after last time was the Memorandum of Understanding, but that can't happen twice, surely.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I don't think I agree with Doug. I mean, this war has been so unpopular in the US from the beginning. Every poll has shown that Americans are just done with these endless, useless wars in the Middle East. And I think this war is really the demonstration in the fastest, most transparent, clear way of why these wars are useless. I mean, talk about the goals from the beginning: destroying the nuclear program, changing the regime, destroying the army, destroying the Navy. None of that happened. And then this new problem has been created as a direct result of the war, which is the Strait of Hormuz. How to resolve that? Also not possible through military means, kinetic on the battlefield, has to go back to the negotiating table. The problem with President Trump's thinking, or the lack of strategy, is that he thinks that pure force, hard power, is the solution, peace through strength. Literally, he's trying to impose that on the Iranian side. And he's just found the worst rival to do that, because the Iranian motto is the exact opposite. Maximum pressure has produced maximum resistance, to the point that top echelons of the Iranian political structure are willing to die, become martyrs for this cause of resistance to the pressure. That the message is, we're not going to capitulate under force, and we're going to resist. Yes, there's going to be a lot of pain on the Iranian side: economic pain, destruction, civilian infrastructure, thousands dead. But nevertheless, that hasn't changed the policy. It's actually made them more resolved, more hardline, and more resistant to this idea. Because the thinking in Iran, just to wrap it, is long term. That if we don't show this deterrence, and if we show weakness in the face of President Trump and the US and Israel, this is going to continue and get worse and keep coming back to us.
Doug, there are only a limited number of tools in the diplomatic toolbox, right? You've got the Memorandum of Understanding, which is one way of doing it. You've got confidence-building measures, another way of doing it. You're exhausting all of those very quickly. The one thing that hasn't been done so far is somebody who can guarantee security. After this, does this give China, perhaps, Russia, perhaps, a chance to become the guarantors? Because they're the only people that Iran seems to really trust now.
Neither one of them is going to go to war for Iran, and Iran knows that. China has been very careful to limit its military commitments. It's focused on its own region, particularly Taiwan and the South China Sea. Russia is very involved in Ukraine. They have made some economic commitments to Iran. They're probably providing some intelligence. They've helped out technology, for example, drones. But they are not going to get directly involved. Iran's view is it's on its own. Iran survived an 8-year war with Iraq, a horrendous war. Saddam Hussein, who attacked back in 1980. They've been through this before. They lived through it. They were prepared, I think, now to go through the same kind of hardship. And they understand they can't count on anyone else. And that's one of the problems here, is that from their standpoint,
Sorry, Doug,
cannot
I'm going to
trust
stop
the
you there
United
because
States.
we are running out of time. And I want to come back very quickly to Nagar. Nagar, on February 28th, they were negotiating, both parties, and then the war happened, led by Israel and America. There's no diplomacy that the Iranians can trust here, now that this has happened effectively again.
Absolutely. And that's the problem on the US side. I mean, there's always been little trust in Tehran for Washington, but President Trump has really brought that to the level of almost zero. Last year also, let's not forget, June 25, they were negotiating, and the 12-day war happened again this year. And then in the middle of the war, they signed the memorandum, which from Tehran's perspective is constantly being violated. The Lebanon issue with Israel violating, the Hormuz, US trying to force open its own parallel way without coordinating with Iran, and really not ending the war and its threats, and the US, forces that were supposed to be removed from Iran's vicinity. So yes, there's very little trust. And that's why the style of diplomacy is also changed. Basically, from the Iranian viewpoint, if there's going to be frozen
Nagar, sadly,
assets unblocked, we want to see their money.
We are out of time. I thank you both for a spirited discussion. That's Doug Bando and Nagar Mortazavi.